Hello, welcome to my kitchen. Again, today I'm going to be making some bread, but this is a special bread. It's going to be unleavened bread. If you follow the Easter story at all, that might ring all sorts of bells because it's an important part of the holiday. Though normally if you're taking communion or Eucharist or whatever you might call it, usually we're using tiny bits of crackers that you might not even be able to discern what it is. But what we're going to make today is unleavened bread. And of course, leaven, really that would be yeast or any process of fermentation that happens in the dough to produce kind of the nice airy bubbles. So basically we're making a flatbread or a cracker. We're not making a cracker, we're going to make a flatbread. Probably be a little tastier than a cracker. But that's what you kind of get when you remove all the leaven from your bread. So again, for the recipe, you're going to need a large-ish bowl, 3 cups of flour, preferably all-purpose flour for this, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, 1.5 teaspoons of salt, 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil or olive oil. I'm going to use olive oil because I like it, 1 cup of cold water, maybe even ice water, something out of the fridge would be great. And then you're going to need a little bit more oil for when you fry, which means you're going to need a skillet or something. Maybe a griddle could work, but the best pan or skillet to make this bread in, it's a skillet flatbread, is something that, like, this is what you would want to reach for to beat off an intruder into your house. So really you can't beat a nice cast iron skillet for this, and that's what I'm going to use today. So let's go ahead and start making it. I have a lot of the ingredients measured out already. Here's 3 cups of flour. You just kind of throw it into the bowl. I got my salt, 1.5 teaspoons, again, of salt. I've made the mistake, I think the last time I put a recipe up of saying 1.5 tablespoons, and I did have one person make it that way, and I felt pretty bad about that. So we don't want to make that mistake. And then we have 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and I did want to talk about this briefly as it relates to leavened and unleavened bread. Baking powder is not leaven in the sense that it causes a fermentation process in the bread, but baking powder is basically a leavening agent. It's rather through a chemical reaction that it causes some bubbles to form. It's kind of the same thing with baking soda, if you've ever added that or use it to clean with vinegar or something, how it fizzes. It kind of does the same thing in the bread, but because there's no fermentation, it does kind of skirt under the radar of leavened or unleavened bread, and if this would qualify. In fact, in many Jewish circles, they will actually sell kosher for Passover baking powder, specifically for people making breads during this time. Now, this isn't the kosher for Passover baking powder, but we're going to use it anyhow. If you are Jewish or have Jewish heritage and really want to honor that background, maybe just don't add the baking powder. You're going to get a really flat loaf, or you could look online for some of that kosher baking powder. When you have all the dry ingredients, which we have basically all the dry ingredients in the bowl right now, you just kind of want to mix it up. I'm just using my hand right now, and I'm going to use my hand. That's why I kind of put on the apron today. I was asking my wife how to tie it, and she said, well, on the Great British Bake Off show, they always tied it in the front. So if you enjoy this show, you should check that out, and you can test and see if she's right about how they tie their aprons. Anyhow, so that's mixed up, and now that's mixed up, we're going to add the oil and the water. So I have another measuring cup, and this is my pitcher of water just out of the fridge, and we want it nice and cold. Part of that is, maybe you've noticed before when you fry things, sometimes when you add colder things to oil, it just somehow fries up just a little bit better. So we're going to add the water and the oil into this and just kind of mix it all up. And what you're looking for is a pretty soft kind of dough. And what I mean by that is, sometimes you picture a loaf and it's this really nice firm ball or something. That's nice, but that's really not what we're going for. It's not going to have that firm surface necessarily, but we are trying to get it nice and soft, and I'll show you kind of what I'm working with here as we get a little closer. It's a bit crummy right now. I mean, just a mess. So we just want it to start coming together a little bit better than that. Scrape it off the fingers. Keep combining all those ingredients. And we are actually getting close. Once you get to that crummy stage, sometimes you keep mixing, but actually you can start almost like you're kneading bread or pressing it together, and it'll help it kind of come together and absorb potentially some of the stuff that hasn't really come in there. So what's happening now is it was all sticky to start with, and you can see the evidence is all over my fingers, but now what I have in the bowl really is not that sticky at all. So this is actually something I could basically right now, there's a few little bits in the bottom of the bowl. Right now I could take this and put it on the counter, and I'm going to be able to pick it up, and it's not going to stick at all. And that's kind of what you're looking for. It's a nice soft loaf. It's not that pretty, like ready to pop in the oven, like if you ever watch a baking show of buns. This is just a nice ball of dough. So once you have it like that, just kind of leave it in your bowl, and you grab yourself some, towel or something. I'm still getting this off my fingers. Grab yourself a towel or something, or some plastic wrap, and we're just going to cover the bowl and let it sit for 10 minutes. That's all, not too long. And so I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we will come back and I'll show you what's next. All right, we are actually starting to come up on the 10-minute mark. Just cleaned up the surfaces, and the skillet's not here anymore. It's actually over on the stove top, ready for me to get it used, even though I haven't fired the burner up or anything. But I did want to talk about this again. The ball of dough, you want it to be soft. You're going to feel it cool from that water being in there, but not sticky. But it's still, you should still feel all the effects of that moisture kind of in there. But I did want to talk just a little bit more about the unleavened bread bit, where we do get that from. It is a celebration of the Passover. So in Exodus, when the Israelites basically get to, through the hand of God, escape from Egypt, one of the stories of that is how they weren't able to have leavened bread. In fact, when they left Egypt, that they didn't have time to take any of the leavening agents or something with them, and so there's just this strong tradition of having unleavened bread, and that's part of the remembrance of the Passover. So even as we come up and we think of the Last Supper that Jesus has with his disciples, the Passover meal, that they would have actually had an unleavened bread. So it's just a really cool thing that we're able to look at. Now, of course, I keep talking about Israelites, Jewish things and like that, which I'm not. The most kosher thing I realized, technically kosher thing that I have is I just happen to use the coarse kosher salt. So I have something at least technically kosher, totally kosher in this meal. So here we got the loaf, or the dough, and what we're going to do now is, this is not one flatbread. This is actually like 10 to 12. So basically, as your family comes together, maybe it's a little bit more special of a meal or something, and maybe each person has a small little bit of flatbread. So you can actually divide this into 10 to 12 pieces, and here's the way to think about it. You're almost grabbing off into your hand. Think of like if you were to hold an egg, like a large egg from Walmart. Like, what size would that be? And like this is that's probably a little bit of too large of an egg. But that's kind of the idea you're going for. You just kind of tear it off. We're gonna make a little bit of a ball, and then we're gonna roll it out, or just press it with your hands. But before that, because you might get it to stick if you do that, just have a little flour handy somewhere, and kind of dredge it in flour, which is something we do with a lot of fried goods in various ways. And so you'll see Like I am just pressing it out. Kind of the ideal thickness for these is like 1/4 of an inch. So we're talking pretty thin. What is that? 6 credit cards thickness? I'm not sure about that. And so you're just getting a little oval or round. This is going to be the flatbread, and we're going to drop this in oil in the bottom of the skillet in just a little bit. And I'll do one more of these, though I don't feel the need for you to see me do this whole process. You might find as you tear it that you find just a little bit more of that stickiness. That's perfectly okay, because you got the flour right here to kind of dredge it and protect those surfaces, so that you can again just press it in. If at any point it starts sticking to your fingers, just sprinkle a little bit more flour on there, or even you can actually put your hand in the flour and give your hand a light coating if necessary. All right, so there's 2, and I'll take you over to the stove and show you just kind of how we cook those up. All right, here we are at the stove, and this is the only angle I have available, so it seems like the best one. You'll see that I have these flatbreads. I went ahead and made the rest. They're all dredged, and what you're going to want to do is add some more oil to your skillet. Make sure it's good and warm. That's probably a little bit more than what's necessary. I'll just spread this around a little bit. Yeah, that's actually too much oil, but you know, it's going to taste all right anyhow. And so you let that oil just heat, and then you're going to stick the flatbread in. Simple as that. And so what we're looking for here is probably to leave it on the first side for 2 to 3 minutes, and then you're going to flip it to the other side. And of course the classic example here is you're looking for golden brown flatbreads. Alright, so these are about done. You'll want to transfer these to a cooling rack. I actually have one just to the side over here. And this was the side that I went in first, where I said it was just a little bit too much oil. So once some of that oil got soaked up, you can see what the other side looks like. And that's really ideally what you're normally looking for. And you'll see that it puffed nice and a little bit. And so you got yourself a nice little flatbread right there. Alright, so that's all of them. I have them all on the cooling rack now, and the first ones that I took off are about cool now. Well, not cool, but cool enough to eat. So I'm going to go ahead and take the biggest one we made, and I'll just show you that it's this inside. It's just a thin bread, and it's just your basic flatbread. Now, a lot of people add garlic or use garlic oil and put different seasonings into the dough. That's clearly not a very traditional communion thing, but you can make this dish, and you can do this for communion, and you can come back to it again and again and experiment adding your own spices or herbs and just really see what you can come up with. So I just encourage you during this time to have fun with your family, eat meals together, and certainly celebrate the Passover, celebrate Easter this coming Sunday. Amen? We'll see you next time.